Welcome to our fantastic de-escalation training, because everybody loves to talk about conflict, right? And the stress that comes with that. So thanks for coming out on a dark winter evening for doing that. My name is Sophie Morse, and actually probably for the duration of teaching you'll be relieved to know I'll take off my mask. It's much easier for everybody. I work with the Dispute Resolution Center in Kitsap County down in Silverdale. I've been working with them as their training coordinator since 2012. And so one of my jobs is I help train, along with a team of fabulous trainers, I'll introduce Danielle in a second, mediators how to mediate. And then the other thing that I get to do is come out in the community and teach classes at organizations and places like here for what we all struggle with. And I say we all because we all struggle with some of these high conflict situations. And so my hope today is that you all will reaffirm the things you already do well. If what you're doing is working, one of my things that I like to say is just keep doing it, right? What I hope that you walk away with from tonight is maybe a better understanding of why what you're doing is working, and then maybe building some muscles of how to do things a little differently when you need to bring out different tools. So that's kind of the broad overview of my approach. So Danielle Meercourt is also from the DRC, and she's come over, she lives in Edmonds, and she had to ride the ferry over from all the way from Edmonds to get here tonight. And she's been in the field a lot longer than I have, actually. So if we go into small groups, which we will, she may be helping out with some of those activities. So just to get a sense to start with, what would be something that you would hope to walk away with from tonight? And we'll just do popcorn, not everybody has to answer.
Confidence.
Confidence, excellent, yeah.
How to help someone who is maybe not angry but is afraid or anxious.
Awesome, awesome, thank you. And actually, Danielle, if you could scribble some of those down, that would be great. Usually I have like a poster board and I'm writing, but I can only handle one kind of media at once, and tonight we got this going on. So what else? Yeah.
Skills that seem to work,
Skill sets that work.
that really work almost any time.
Okay, the magic one. We'll try.
Better listening. In other words, when you're listening, you also need to know the right questions to ask.
Great.
So that you know you're understanding.
Awesome. Perfect. We will touch on that. Excellent. Anyone else? Yeah.
How to keep myself from escalating.
How to keep yourself from escalating. Yeah. Yeah. It's a big one. Anything else? I just like to get a sense of what people want to walk away with. So, great. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, I have this huge display up behind me. Before COVID, I didn't do this. In fact, I was almost adamant, like, I am never going to do PowerPoint because I just like to talk to people. And if I'm writing something, I write it, things like that. So COVID changed all that, and it is helpful for visual learners. If it becomes like this obstacle that gets between you and me, then I may just sort of pause it. But anyway, so we'll go along with it. I like this quote: between stimulus and a response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. It's Viktor Frankl. At least it's attributed to him. We don't really know for sure. That space between stimulus and response, which is our experience of what's happening outside of us and our internal response and then our behavioral response, is where we are really going to be doing all of this work. And broadly speaking, what I hope you to walk away with from tonight and ongoing as you build your conflict muscles is how do you build the capacity of that space, right? That's really all it is. How do we work with that space so that it gives us the best possible tools? Okay, so starting out with, I forgot to mention, I do have a handout there. It's for you to follow along. I apologize, I didn't realize the print was going to get so small. I have this this technique where I go only, no smaller than font 24 on PowerPoint slides that I print out like that, and I'm like, okay, that betrayed me because that's really too small to read. So I apologize, but it's for you to either follow along, but it's also for you to take notes on. And later there'll be some need for taking notes as you're working in small groups. So hope that's useful. So a little level setting is, what are we really trying to accomplish? Because if we don't know what it looks like to de-escalate, we're not going to know when we succeed or when we don't succeed, right? So we're just going to kind of go over that. It may seem obvious, but maybe not. And how do we know we've done it? Okay. So really what we're trying to do in the severe weather shelter situations you're in, but also in life, right, is to get from that place of what we might call fighting or high conflict to a place of problem solving, or what we call healthy conflict, because conflict is something that can be, of course, very healthy for us. So what are some traits of what you see on the left-hand side there, what fighting looks like, what high conflict, what do you notice? What do you see? What do you hear that tells you you're there?
Loud voices, yelling.
Yelling, loud voices.
Body language.
Body language, like what kind?
The expression on the face, stiff posture, leaning forward, that kind of thing.
Stiff posture, I like that. Yeah, that tension. Yeah, sometimes people get big or they shut down. It depends. Yeah. What else? Anything else? What might you feel? What tells you that you might be in that place? Not necessarily anybody else, but you yourself. Yeah.
Your blood pressure, your heart rate.
Heart rate goes up, your pulse increases. Anything else? My breath gets really shallow. Sometimes I just stop breathing. You know, and I'm really concentrating hard, or I'm kind of tense about something. I suddenly realize I haven't breathed in the last 15 seconds. And so, right? Shallow breathing, or just, yeah, accelerated breathing. Okay, yeah. So another thing that we might notice in the cognitive realm is that we're very positional, defensive, positional, defensive, rigid, my way or the highway thinking, right? It's kind of black or white, and we are pretty fixated on what's wrong. We're not very flexible. We're very rigid. So those are some qualities of how we might be cognitively functioning at that time, too. And you notice this, right? This is not news. Okay, so where we're trying to get to is over here. This is the healthy conflict. What does that look like? What do you notice when you're in healthy conflict? What does that look like?
It's more problem solving. Oh, never mind.
Ha! Ding, 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 ding. Yeah.
There's a dialogue.
This is a dialogue back and forth. Yeah. People actually responding to what the other's saying. And, yeah. Mm-hmm. Physiologically or physically, anything you notice?
Probably calmer. My heart would be racing.
Okay, so your
stomach wouldn't feel.
the stomach, right? Not as tied up in knots. So a lot of these have a what's that word? Corollary over there, right? So tight stomach over there, less of that going on over here. Heart rate's down. Someone had something over here. No? Okay. Yeah, thinking-wise, what do you notice? So cognitively over here, no, my way or the highway, black and white. Over here, yeah, more flexible. Mm-hmm.
More willing to listen.
More willing to listen. Yeah, over here, it's all about what I want to say. What'd you say?
Compromise.
Compromising, yep, that's a combination of that with listening and flexibility. Yeah, and so there might be actually some empathy going on here too, right? Okay, yeah, so just to level set a little bit. So we're not talking about over here on the right, rainbows, butterflies, and unicorns, everyone's hugging. We're just talking about problem solving. We're just talking about you can genuinely move forward without happening, okay? All right. So to get from here to here, I like to think of there being a roadmap. Sometimes that's helpful for people because they like to know what stone they're going to step on next to get across whatever this chasm is, right? So a roadmap, I include 5 steps in the roadmap. So understanding the nature of conflict can be one of them. it's helpful. We won't be covering that tonight, unfortunately. Just there's a brief kind of description of what conflict looks like, just technically what it's defined by, but we won't get there tonight. So self-management, someone mentioned, how do I keep from de-escalating myself? Number one tool for de-escalation. A lot of people get disappointed when I say that actually the most important tool in de-escalation is one that I can't really teach you, because that is how to de-escalate yourself, although we will be talking about at least one powerful tool tonight because it's so important. But you know, as we are adults and we learn and grow as we get older and gain experience, what we're trying to do is learn how to make ourselves less reactive, right? Over time. So that's our sort of growth, and that's going to be a different process. It's going to look different for everybody. So another thing I forgot to mention, so over here is very reactive, and then we have the other word that we have over here, which is to respond, right? So we kind of separate and contrast those out, reacting versus responding. And then key, active listening, and the de-escalation tools we'll go over tonight. So that's really key, and it's not all about listening. It's also about speaking for ourselves. What do we need, and how to articulate that so that the other person can actually meet those needs, okay? And then the fifth step is kind of a giveaway. It's like that negotiation, conversation, dialogue that would happen. Okay, so really tonight we're going to be looking at those three. Okay, where does it start? With ourselves, and then the next two sections. So that's a broad overview of where we're going. Okay, so specifically, the three things we're going to touch on tonight are approaches, skills, and then some tips at the end. So approaches, I spend a lot of time on this, and people are like, well, I just want some tools that I can walk away with that I know are going to work, right, in most situations. And if we talk about kind of the more 30,000-foot view, or the lens through which we're going to function, through which we're going to be doing our skill building and implementing our skills, we have a much better idea of, we're much more flexible, and we're in a better position to pick the tool that we need, okay? So we're going to be talking about broad sort of lenses through which we're going to be using our skills first. Some people call it the contrast between principles and tools, or something close to that anyway. So it's in the leadership books right now, and you talk about it's more effective to think about skill building on the level of principles first before you get into the actual hands-on. So we're going to start that way. Then we will go into some tools, and then we'll go into some tips, and intermixed with all that, and at the end we're going to do scenarios. So, all right, let's start. Any questions before we get started? Okay. Curiosity. So this might be like, Sophie, I didn't come here to learn that I had to be curious, because I wanted some hard tools again, right? Endo, why is that important? Any ideas? Yeah. Go ahead.
You can't help someone if you act like you're not interested
Okay.
in what their situation is or what's going on with them, or if you aren't acting like you're interested in trying to find out so you can talk about it.
Right.
And if you're turned off to that, then they're turned off to you. I think it was a way to build rapport.
Yeah, so in the process, in your role as helping people, conflict will arise, and you still want to help them, right? Just because there's conflict doesn't mean you still don't want to help them, and the only way you can help them is to know what it is they need help with, right? Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
Curiosity keeps you in the moment, so you're not jumping all over the place. It helps to keep you present.
It does help keep you present. Yeah. Funny thing, you had something over here.
It was,
Oh, she took it.
it's not a conversation.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, so you get that. All right, so one curious thing that may have to do with able to be present when we're curious is it is impossible for us to feel both curiosity and fear at the same time. Well, that's pretty handy. So maybe we're getting our anxiety up, maybe we have some fear around a situation, if we can turn on our curiosity switch, oh my gosh, superpower, I can't feel both at the same time. Guess what? I'm not afraid anymore. I don't know, it's pretty cool. It just happens to be a neurological fact. So that could help you. Oops, gotta read through the rest of them. It buys time for both people. If you engage in curiosity, you're asking questions, you're listening to understand, and it really helps the whole situation. It gets both of you out of that reactivity. We're kind of saying the same thing in different ways. Keep going ahead too far. So it does call on us to use more open-ended questions. We'll touch on that in a little bit. Versus, what do you need versus did you want this room? You notice the difference between those two, right? The second one is just a yes, no. Whereas what did you need is just opens it right up. And so that's a muscle that we kind of have to learn to train. Okay, sincerity and authenticity. Okay, this may seem like another no-brainer. Why is this important?
If the person doesn't think you're sincere, they're not going to be listening to you, you're not going to be able to de-escalate and come to any kind of agreement.
Right. Yeah. If they don't sense you're really there. Yep.
I kind of what I was, but just knowing that you care is
Knowing that you care, if the other person knows that you care, it's going to go a long way to de-escalating. Yeah.
I'd say lack of sincerity provokes suspicion.
Yeah. Because who are the people that you're working with? And where's their nervous system, right? It's pretty jacked up a lot of the time. They're not in a place of a lot of security, right? So they're going to have a certain amount of anxiety. And so what comes with anxiety, BS detectors are at the max, right? Right? So if you're not showing up real, yeah, they're going to figure that out real fast. So another part of that is knowing your why. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But part of being sincere and authentic is just knowing why you're doing what you're doing. You're not performing, right? You can't be in this kind of role and just be performing, right? You're going to be there because you're real. Awkwardness is to be expected, especially if you're trying out some new muscles, trying out new skills, you're new to this or whatever it is. Just accept that. It's okay. Be real, right? Just be cautious about techniques or gimmicks that reduce authentic connection, and it's okay to try on new things. Right? All right. So non-judgment and person versus behavior. You may have heard this before, how it can be valuable to separate a person from their behavior. Like when you're having an issue with them, if we just engage that awareness that it's not the person themselves that is the problem. It's the behavior that you're witnessing, that you're experiencing, that they're implementing, right? So that's really good exercise for us to do in the moment. And then non-judgment, separating the person from behavior can help with that. It also encourages us to get to that curiosity place. It reduces the us versus them outlook. Yeah, engages curiosity. It can be hard to achieve sometimes, right? Because we're going to have judgments. That's who we are as people. We are, right? It's okay. And how do we kind of step back from them, be more aware of them, kind of work on inviting them to leave the room? That could be helpful. So language matters. I've heard people, even in the workplaces I've been, say, well, she or he's a bully. It doesn't tell me anything, to be honest. It really tells me nothing. And it certainly doesn't tell me anything about how to solve the issue at hand. So it's much more helpful to say, I experience her as speaking loudly and dominating the conversation a lot of the time. Oh, okay, that's information. We can work with that, right? Or that helps me understand why this person is a challenge for you. So if you, in your own mind, are finding these sort of pop-up labels happening inside your head, just if you want to figure out how to take those labels away, try describing the behavior. You know, that's really the main thing, instead of focusing on a label, which I'm sure you're all really good at doing anyway. It allows us to hold people accountable without judging their being or their right to be, right? Separating the person from the behavior is actually a challenge in this culture a lot of times because we're so afraid to hold anyone accountable because it's conflated with judging a person. And no, I'm not judging a person, I am dealing with a behavior. And I'm needing to set boundaries around a behavior, two very different things. All right, working our way through these different approaches. So I'm sure a lot of people here have heard about restorative practices. Anyone heard the phrase before? Anybody not heard the phrases about restorative practice? Excellent, okay. So restorative practices it's really been growing in the field of education, in healthcare, in the criminal justice system. It's around a different approach to discipline and justice a lot of times. And we're using it in the field of conflict resolution a lot. Okay? So I'm not going to explain the whole field to you because it's a big one. I'm going to boil it down to some key takeaways and principles. It's a fact that people respond much better to having things done with them rather than to and at them. That's a really foundational principle of restorative justice and restorative practices. People want to have things done with them rather than to and at them. Now, someone who's coming into it, they have so little control, right? Anyone who's coming into a shelter has almost no control in their life, right? Their experience of life is things happening to and at them 100% of the time. So if you can introduce a little nugget of things happening with them, oh my gosh, it could have a big impact, okay? Give them a little respite from the onslaught of daily life, okay? Adopting a we approach is another way to kind of understand it. We're in this together. I am not here as a higher level than you. I'm not going to be coming at you from this position of I have higher value, or I'm not going to really be pushing my role as someone with authority on you as more than I need to. So that we approach, thinking about not you and me, but we. It's a relational and partnership-oriented approach to interaction. Relational. So that might look like, I'm having a lot of difficulty with this particular guest. You know what? I'm just going to get to know them for about 5 or 10 minutes. I'm going to just check it out, get to know them a little bit. I don't know. That might be helpful. Shared expectations. This is basically the rule book that you give them when they walk in the door, right? That's what you're doing. Shared expectations is the lack of shared expectations is where a lot of things go sideways in agreements and in interactions between customers and vendors, between business people, between family members. What were the expectations of the different people walking into the situation, right? So if you could check that out, find out how much they overlapped, how much they were different, you're going to get a long way to understanding what the conflict is about. So the more you can build shared expectation, you know this already, the more people know the rules. Isn't it something that they all have to listen to the rules every night kind of thing? Yeah. I think that's one of the scenarios that we have later on. So that's because if everybody has the same information, the chances are greater that there will be fewer issues, right? It's not a full fail-safe system, but it helps. Avoid assuming knowledge, of course, shared understanding or comprehension. Even if they've heard them, does it mean they understand, right? And then looking at, addressing violations. This is kind of getting into a bit of a skill instead of just a broad approach, but I had to throw it in here. One way to approach it, and it may not work in every situation. Assume the guest may not be aware of the rule, first of all. If you know them, and you know they know them, obviously that's not going to fly. But it's a courteous and generous way to approach the situation, right? Kind of giving people the benefit of the doubt. If not, inform them of the rule in an open and friendly way, and then if they challenge it, know your why. Because it's just the rules isn't always going to be the most effective. What's the why? And what's a why that you think they can hear? Okay. Think about the ways that it affects everybody, not just, well, it's going to make my job harder, or your neighbor harder, or it's going to make it harder for you. think about expanding it out as much as possible. Just some thoughts. Changing a no to a yes. Anybody have any idea what that's about?
No meaning, when you take a first aid class and you approach somebody who you perceive as needing help,
Mm-hmm.
and you ask them, can I help you? And the answer is no, you're stuck. You can't really.
Is that yes, no question again?
Yeah.
Yep.
And so what you want to do is talk to them, and eventually your goal is to get them to change that into a yes, so you can help them. And you can move on to solve the problem of whatever's going on.
Excellent. Okay. So in case you didn't hear, she's sharing the scenario of in a healthcare situation. You come up and say, can I help you? And the answer is no. And you kind of know that they probably could benefit from some help. So engaging them in a conversation to maybe turn that no into more of a yes. Brilliant. I hadn't even thought about that angle of it. So thank you for bringing that, because that could be totally helpful to all of you in the situations that you're working with. See, it's already up there. Oops. Anyway, so yeah, if the answer is no from your end, can I do X, Y, Z? No. Figuring out how you can turn it to a yes. And you might be like, well, Sophie, you just told us to be authentic and sincere, right? So I'm not going to be faking it. Right, exactly. You're not going to fake it. But how could you turn a no to a yes genuinely and authentically? And if you've ever raised children, you may have noticed that that's helpful, right? So instead of the no, what's the choice that I can give them? It's something neurological again. I can't tell you why it is, but that is how our brains are hardwired. If we can get a choice, even if the choice is kind of like this thing that I don't want and this thing I don't want, I feel better because you've just given me a choice. Again, just brain science. So emphasize what you can do. That's the key thing. So if the answer is no, what can you do? Think about what you can do versus what you cannot do. So example, if you're going to be playing a movie loudly, you'll need to be outside, and you may not be allowed to back in. That may not fit the scenarios you're working with. But again, giving them basically their choice. And people value a process that's fair even if the result is not something they want. That's another brain science thing. If people go to court and they think the judge is against them, they're not going to trust anything that happens in that court. If they think the process is fair, they're going to accept whatever the judge is going to say. It's just, again, it's brain science. It's something that you can count on. So the fairness in the process is what you're going to be leaning on. Another approach, and we're getting to the end, trust me, is about being trauma-informed, and I think you probably are all fairly familiar with a certain amount of that. What do you already know about being trauma-informed? It's another catchphrase that's really entering a lot of the institutions in our society right now. So really, if I were to, again, encapsulate an entire field into just a few helpful things, being trauma-informed is this allowance in our mind as we're interacting with somebody that they may come from a place of trauma, and understanding what does that mean? What does it mean when someone comes from a place of unresolved trauma? What does it do to their brains? And what does it do to their ability to change their behavior? Now, you're not here because you wanted to be neurologists or doctors or anything. And though there can be some really simple principles that you can apply, it is not the basic kind of common knowledge now that 100% of the homeless population has PTSD. They didn't all start out that way. A lot of people end up homeless because of PTSD, but not everyone. But once they are homeless, it will create situations for people where they will, 100% of them will have PTSD. So you're guaranteed to be working with a population that is affected by trauma. So having a little understanding about what does that mean? Again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, so we don't, the pressure's off you to be in those kinds of rules, but maybe you can have a little bit of a leg up in terms of understanding what does it mean in terms of what the other person is experiencing. So here's the only chart I'm going to be having, okay? This is a chart of basically what capabilities does our brain have at different levels of emotional arousal, okay? So over here, we talked about the high arousal, right? The fighting mode, the fight, flight, freeze, the reactive mode, the inflexible, positional, defensive, kind of, right? So that's going to be more over here on the right-hand side. And over here is more calm. We talked about being able to engage in conversation, be empathetic, listen. Okay, that's going to be more over here. So the more hyper-aroused or more aroused someone gets in their emotional nervous system, what they have available to them in their brain goes down, okay? So the first thing they're going to lose is the prefrontal cortex, which is language, which is rational thought, which is logic, okay? Super, right? Great. Okay, so basically when someone is in the middle of this chart at alarm, they're going to only be able to operate on an emotional level, probably not super irrational. Okay, so what does this mean for you? You're like, okay, now I'm depressed. I want to go home and I want to quit my severe weather shelter volunteer job. No, it just means that if they're not able to engage in a rational conversation, your cue is then to start kicking in your empathy skills, your ability to relate to people emotionally, your patience with them in terms of getting that they're coming from a really hard place. And here's the key. This is what I want you to take away from this whole trauma-informed conversation, is really changing our frame of reference to understanding that if someone is behaving in a challenging way, it's not because they won't change, it's because they can't. It's not because they won't change their behavior, it's because they can't. It's a hard place to be in.
Is the word can't, or is the word they don't know how?
The result is the same. The result, so I guess what you're asking is do they ever have the potential? Absolutely, yes. Can they learn the tools and skills? But in that moment, if trauma is what is affecting the amount of brain they have available to them, there's going to be an element of can't versus won't, which helps us have a little bit more empathy and non-judgment, really. Again, we're talking about the lens through which we're looking at these and interacting with these folks. So it just helps us get into maybe a more partnership kind of relationship, less frightened ourselves, maybe less judgy, less demanding of like, you have to do this now. It's like, okay, I'm working with a brain that only has the limbic system on board. Okay, what can I do with that? Well, I could come alongside them, I can chat, I can get to know them, I can do all my human things that I do when I want to engage somebody in an empathetic way. And then once I've built that little relationship, see if I can get them to move a little bit back along the scale. So that's what you're going to be doing when you do that. When you have that relational approach, that emotional approach, you're helping to move them. Is that the right way? Yes. Okay. All right. It resembles our approach to anyone who's in high conflict, so you don't even have to know that they're, in trauma or, reliving their trauma. You don't have to know that. You know when the people are in high conflict. The approaches are very similar, okay? You're working with people whose your prefrontal cortex has been hijacked, okay? That's what it's over here. When someone's flooded, they're angry, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter if there's trauma or not. Their prefrontal cortex hijacked, right? So it resembles a very, the skills you're going to bring on board are very similar, okay? And then you want to shift the frame from won't to can't, if that helps you, okay? We're not saying that people can never change. It's just that in that moment, they're encountering a barrier to changing their behavior that you may have no idea about. Okay. Working with some mental illness. Okay. And you do, right? Some, to some extent. I am not an expert. This is not my area of expertise at all. Probably not yours either. Just some highlights, though. If you're working with someone who has any kind of psychosis or hallucinogenic kind of experiences, it might be good to make sure that you're not aligning with their psychosis. Like, oh, well, let me help the ghost that you see in the room move along. I don't know. I don't think that will be the most helpful. It's also not helpful to contradict. There are no ghosts here, right? It's like working with someone with dementia or Alzheimer's. You do not argue with them. That is a no-go situation. So being conscious of that, trying to find that balance. Also just knowing mental illnesses, most of them do not result in people having dangerous behavior. It's mostly the combination of trauma and everything else that does that. De-escalation can take time and resources, so if you are working with someone with mental illness, you're going to need more resources, and that's okay. You need to ask for help, ask for more time to be with this one person versus all the other people in that moment. Just be conscious of that and how you need to divvy up your resources in the moment. The second bullet point there is just, it's actually drilling down into particular skill. So you're working with someone that may seem very combative. So do you ever encounter that? So someone who's very big, you know, not necessarily physically big, but energetically big, kind of like, I'm going to get my way. They seem scary, maybe loud. Okay, so one way to find out, is this person going to be a real problem, or is this person a real problem, safety-wise, is to just do a little test, right? So you're going to ask them, a good test to do is, hey, can you mind walking over here so we can have this conversation over here? It's just an innocent, like, natural, just casual, like, can we just step over here? That's another de-escalation principle. You want to have conversations as private as possible. If they, 90% of the time they'll comply, maybe 95, then you know, no, this person is not going to be a problem. They're just hyped up, okay? If they don't comply, that's a red flag, and you might want to bring in other resources, like perhaps 911. Okay, so that's just a little gauge to help you know where's the line, because I'm not an expert here, right? So that's just one way. All right. Understanding anger. It's going to take a few moments to just talk about what are some aspects of anger that can help us, if we understand it better, work with it better, okay? I forget which slide I had next. I mean, this is what it looks like, right? You've seen this in your own behavior, maybe the people that you love and your teenagers or whatever back in the day. So there's this kind of flood of emotion and energy, and you notice their cognitive abilities plunging, right? But their energy gets really big, and they're over here in the my way or the highway, all that stuff. So what's happening is your body, along with this, the physiology of this, is your body is releasing a lot of fun, adrenaline hormones into your system, cortisol and all those nice things. And those hormones, when they reach your brain through the bloodstream, find the gateway to your prefrontal cortex, and they close it off, because now you're in fight, flight, freeze, and the only thing your body and your brain is concerned with is what? To keep you alive, right? It's just there to keep you alive. That's the number one priority. So they just realized, okay, or their brain thinks that you're in a life-threatening situation. It's interpreting the situation that way, and it's cutting off the complicated parts of our brain so we don't have to think about the fact that we have to pull our hand away from the hot fire and all those things, right? So it shuts down the prefrontal cortex. You only have the amygdala. It takes a while for those hormones to metabolize out of the bloodstream, okay? So that's this arc. There's a peak of anger, and as long as the stimulus goes away, people can walk away, or the whatever is antagonizing you or that person gets resolved a little bit, then that has, the body has a system a system and also a process of metabolizing it out of the bloodstream. So that takes a little time. It varies, can't tell you exactly how long. And then oftentimes there's kind of a way that it overcompensates. And so during this kind of under the level of good judgment line that you see there, someone might be in this place of, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'll never do that again. What can I do for you? Like they're promising the world. Their judgment isn't quite back online yet. Okay, so just be aware of that. May be helpful, may not be helpful. just a few more things about anger. It's not all bad. Anger's there for a reason. And another way to think about anger that I think is going to help with your active listening skills, and we may touch on this later, I can't remember, is it's usually concealing other emotions underneath. So what other emotions might be underneath the anger that you're seeing in the people that you're working with? Fear. Yeah. Tons of it, right? What else?
Apprehension, not knowing,
Uncertainty. Yeah. Total lack of security, uncertainty. Sometimes confusion, disorientation, right? When they're coming, maybe this is a new environment for them. Obviously, new people around. So, there's a lot that could be underlying anger. When you're working in sort of more day-to-day situations out in the world and you see anger, one way, if you want to engage a kind of superpower of empathy and understanding and care for your fellow human beings, is to sort of hunch what might be, based on what they're saying in their anger, what might be an underlying emotion going on there? Well, I do know that their aunt died last week. Or I know that they just got in a scary car situation this morning on the way to work and it really rattled them. Just thinking about that kind of thing. When you see anger, what else is going on? Oh, I know that they've had trouble sleeping lately, okay? All these things can feed into and result in anger. And so understanding that can help our active listening skills, and I'll touch on that a little bit. And of course, it impacts our judgment. Okay. Questions? I'm going to have you, in twosies or threesies, whichever is more comfortable, just turn to someone near you and just say, what were your takeaways just now? What did we do? What we talked about, if you can't think of a takeaway, just think about, well, how does any of this apply? And then you can come back to me and say, Sophie, this was all irrelevant, whatever. So do that, and we'll report back in like 3 minutes.
Maybe one thing about someone else that might touch you away from anger.
And that helps you be curious, right? You start asking questions. What happened? That's curiosity.
I think like so many of these points all go back to what you were saying already. So when and I were like, that can just, that can light up other fear things.
Any takeaways? What did y'all share? Ask again. What were some of your takeaways? Yeah.
Maybe that empathy is really good, thing to have on your side. Just going into the situation with somebody, I told her I've seen lots of people that were angry, and just saying a couple words to them to know that they're on you're on their side, and they'll be like, oh yeah, okay, you're okay to talk to, because so the empathy thing I think can go a really long way.
Yeah, it really can.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that comes more naturally to some people than others. So if it's not something your first go-to, it's just a muscle to build. Yeah, because those of us with a lot of empathy tend to be kind of weak on the boundary setting or like the more firm things that we need to do, and that's the muscle I have to build, right? So there's no judgment either way. Anybody else? Yeah.
Well, looking at it from a different angle, I think, is because in a tense situation like that, I always freeze up and go, I am blank, and if I can, like we talked about curiosity being, it's a real, it's kind of, you can't be satirically curious, I mean, if you're curious, it's kind of a real thing.
Yeah.
And it also gets you thinking, why am I supposed to be curious? But it helps you get started down the path, because if I'm looking for some grandiose thing. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, oftentimes when I might be in a back and forth where it might get heated, my brain does tend to freeze about like, okay, my own judgment, what it is that I wanted, how to articulate it. Like, it's just like, this is a lot of alarm bells going on. And if I switch into the gear, like I'm going to listen to them, it's like, I know how to do that. Not only does it help de-escalate them, it helps build, gives me information, but it also buys me time to like, okay, now I'm kind of in familiar territory and we're making progress here. So if it works for you, that's great. Yeah.
How do we discuss getting stuck in a real situation where you're stuck between empathy and rules?
I know.
And trying to mesh those rules, and it's like,
Yeah.
It's kind of hard.
It is, and I think the challenge, or maybe the challenge that we're being asked to rise to, is how to blend them, how to marry them, so that we're not got to kick my empathy to the curb because I got to be tough guy here, right? How do I bring them together? And that might be the restorative, like, okay, I need to set a boundary because if I don't, everyone else here is going to suffer, and I can come alongside them and do that. Right, so it's coming alongside, it's being very human with them, and this is how it is. But we'll touch on that in terms of a specific skill in a few minutes. Anybody else? Okay. So we're going to move into the actual skills, yay, right? What you came with, or tools. So these are the 5 we're going to touch on in the next. Let's see where are we at. Yeah, about an hour. Okay. So the first one, when someone said, how do I de-escalate myself? Here we go, right? Here's one tool. Okay. It's not all of them because it could be music, it could be yoga, it could be breathing, it could be looking out the window and saying, okay, there's a tree, that tree grounds me, okay, I'm back. It could be sinking your heels into the floor. It could be all these things, right? Just a lot of tools that you can kind of pick up along the way. So this is where it is on the roadmap, just a reminder. And this is I put this back up again because this is what Viktor Frankl's talking about, or whoever said this quote anyway, is talking about. It's that space between the stimulus and response. How do I manage myself? So one model is the awareness wheel. There's other models out there. There's a ladder of inference. It's basically these different ways of explaining how do we get from data that's coming in through our senses to the behavior that follows our behavior. Okay? It's just how do we explain that? And there's a number of different models. This is one of them, okay? So the idea is that you're bringing in information through your senses, and when we're talking about human interaction, conflict, it's mostly the eyes and ears, right? What we see and what we hear. So we see body language, and we hear words. We also hear tone of voice. We see facial expressions, those kinds of things, right? That's the information coming in. And the next thing that happens is we make up a story about that. We make meaning out of it. We interpret it. That's how our brains function. We can't turn that off. It's not a bad thing. It just happens to get us into a lot of trouble sometimes, okay? So just to know, the story I'm making up with all this information coming in is fallible, and I need to examine it at some time to time. Okay, based on the story you make up from the data that comes in, you're going to have a feeling about it one way or the other. It might be a mild feeling, but it's going to generate some kind of feeling. Based on the feeling that you have, you're going to have an intention. And based on the intention, you're going to have a behavior. The intention is a desire, and then the behavior is what comes out of that desire. Now, all of that happens in a split second. A lot of times we think we're just going from the information coming into the behavior. On that diagram, it's 12 o'clock to 9 o'clock. That's what we think is happening. But instead, we're going all the way around in a very short amount of time. So all this to say, can't spend a ton of time. I'd love to spend, I love teaching this in greater time frames, but all this to say, if there is something that you're doing, that's the behavior, that doesn't work for you very well, that you would like to change, you can back this up. Okay, what was the intention or desire behind it? Well, I wanted to show them, or I wanted to defend myself, or I wanted to assert my authority, or whatever it was. There's nothing judgmental about it. It's just a fact. Intention or desire, there's nothing bad about it. Okay, well, why did I want to do that? Maybe I needed to in the moment, or I thought I needed to. Well, that's fine. But if I'm like, I don't really like the fact that I desired to defend myself, okay? So then I go back to the feeling. So, I'm going backwards around this dial here. What was the feeling? Well, I was feeling scared. I was feeling threatened. I was feeling like I was being diminished or whatever it was. Okay, that might explain why you kind of went off the handle there. Oh, why was I feeling that way? Wait, see what I'm doing? I'm interrogating each of these steps. So if this is something that's useful for you, I learned this, 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And when I stopped to think about it and use it, it's actually very helpful. And it does give me information about why I just kind of went off suddenly in this one time. I'm sure it's very rare that I go off. Right? Okay. Again, that was a really quick review of one tool, but it is something that can be very powerful. You can take it with you the rest of your life. Okay, so here we go into active listening. We're going to touch on this with some very specific informational pieces that might help you tune your active listening skills. Remember that this is the third step on the roadmap. So once you've managed yourself as much as possible, you're walking into situations and you've got a pretty good grip on how you can ground yourself and where you're at and knowing your why, all those good things. This is where you're going to pull in your active listening skills. Why do we do this? Obviously, it maybe seem really obvious that why we do this is empathy, it's helping us understand how to help them, all those things. When we can name our experience or someone else's experience, again, the language, when we can name it, not just think about it or feel empathy with them, when we can name it, the frontal lobe gets re-engaged. Again, brain science, I don't know why. Maybe there's some brain scientists that are figuring this out, but in book after book after book that I've been reading and podcast after podcast, they say, this is an actual fact. Because language, for some reason, helps us get from the amygdala driving the bus and everything else being shut down to suddenly our prefrontal cortex is re-engaged. That's a superpower. So is active listening skill a good thing to have? I think so. Okay, so here's I break it down into 4 elements. Attending, fancy word for all the nonverbals that show you're listening. So how do you communicate to someone that you're listening? You were just nodding your head, right? How else? Eye contact. Leaning forward. Doing that, nonverbals. Sometimes the semi-verbals, right? Those things that come naturally to you, right? You're not performing this, you're just being you. Reflecting, we'll talk about that, how to feedback. Open-ended questions, key, right? So trying to work that muscle of changing those closed-ended questions to an open one, right? Do you need a place for your parka? Or what space do you need is a different kind of question to ask. They're given a certain amount of space, I understand that in the shelter, but. And then summarizing is sort of a fancy word for how you might do a kind of summarizing or ending, kind of reflecting back to people. So that's just a little overview. When it doesn't happen, this is what happens when people don't feel heard. Okay, they repeat themselves. They repeat themselves louder, right? You get to see that pufferfish anger thing. The big energy happens. And it could end up in physical, violence is an extreme term, but invasion of personal space, some kind of violation of physical boundaries. They grab a pen, or I don't know what it is. Or they shut down, right? You've seen that too. I don't feel heard. I am going to be invisible. That kind of quiet, and you're like, uh-oh, right? Someone's not calm and peaceful over there. They're seething or something, right? Or they're about to explode. Anyway. Or you got to worry about them because they've turned inwards so far. So you can't even reach them, okay? So that's maybe common sense, but just had to put that out there. So when we're active listening and we need to feedback, and you all do this naturally, I'm not going to try to crawl into your techniques and change how you behave as a human being to other people. And though, if active listening is something that's like, I don't really know what it is, I don't really know what it looks like when I've done it, how do I know when I've done it? If it's something that's a little nebulous for you, this is a little something to concretize it for you. This is some structure you can hang it on. Again, when you can help name people's experience, it helps them de-escalate and re-engage their frontal cortex, prefrontal cortex. It helps to reduce their emotional arousal. Okay. So those 3 categories, think of us as like radio antennas. So if we can tune our antennas into those 3 categories, facts, feelings, underlying needs. So what's a common underlying need for someone coming into a homeless shelter? And not just what they materially need, talking about more the things you can't see or touch, the human needs.
They need to feel like they're being respected.
Yeah, respected.
Listened to. That they're safe.
Safety. Others?
Sometimes they need human interaction.
Interaction. Human interaction.
Yeah.
Reassurance.
Reassurance. Yeah. I mean, you could probably name a bunch of them. It's important, though. It's part of your why. It's their why, right? It's their why behind whatever behavior you might be seeing, the word salad that they might be that might be flowing out of their mouths, right? So when you can reflect back any of those categories, it's going to be helpful. But the further down you go, the more helpful it might be. It might not be appropriate in the moment to like feedback. Oh, I know that you probably want to feel seen. It's probably not going to be something you'd be sharing, right? But you could at least think about it in your mind, and that helps you kind of reach them, and it might help you kind of know how you want to approach them, all those things. So it could help inform you in the lens through which you're going to be operating. The feeling level, it might come into play. Especially when you're working with anger and you're going to hunch those underlying feelings. I get this is kind of disorienting because this is a new place for you, or whatever the context might be. You could name that word disorienting, that feeling. Just throw it out there. It's a trial balloon. Don't get attached to it, because if they say no, it's this, no, okay, fine. They've just shared more. So you become kind of a safe place. They feel like sharing more, just because you hunched already what they might be feeling. So anyway, that might be a way to kind of organize how you are providing that feedback if you feel like you need that. Again, you might just naturally engage with people, and if you want to work your muscle and it's not something that you feel comfortable with, that might help. This is just a little primer on, what's the difference between open and closed and a question. You have it in your handouts, so I won't spend much time on it. Okay, here we go. First scenario. Okay, so in little, probably more than twosies or three, I don't know, groups of 3. You're going to go into little groups and go over this first scenario and use, as much as you can, active listening as the approach that you might take. It might not seem like the approach that you would take, but let's build in something to do with active listening in this scenario. And it is in your manuals, but it is hard to read, so I'll leave it up here. So after 10 p.m., a guest is watching a movie on their cell phone. They have headphones on. Another guest complains to you that the video watcher is talking to the movie, laughing, and keeping other guests awake. The movie-watching guest overhears the complaint and mutters, "No one's going to tell me what to do or can or can't do." You want to discuss the issue with the movie-watching guest. So one place to start to ground yourself, or just for the sake of the exercise, is what might be some feelings that they're having, and what are some underlying needs that they're hinting at. Again, you don't need to feed back that underlying need, but it can inform you how to maybe approach them and the situation. So let's see if there's another slide here. How might you reflect any of those back to the guest? Identify specific language you would use. So let's make this concrete. You have a pen, something to write on there. I think it's page 16 in your little handouts. You don't have to go to that third question. You could also throw in there, what are the feelings that I might have? Okay, if you want to take it to the next level, what are some feelings I have as I'm approaching this situation? Go ahead and own it. Write them down. What are my underlying needs? Well, I need to be able to implement the rules. You know, I need some sense of stability, consistency, authority in this situation. Those could be an example of underlying needs. You might come up with other ones. Okay, give you 5 minutes on that, and then we'll come back. Yeah, and in my mind, I may be like having conflicting ideas in that moment of like, okay, so it's Sophie told us, and I know intuitively, it's always better to have these conversations more in private, and this person's lying down in their sleeping bag. And I'm asking them to get up and move. Like, I would have those in conflict and tension, and I'd have to, in the moment, kind of decide, which way am I going to go, right? And is it possible to have, like, this sotto voce kind of whispering conversation where in place? And if not, okay, you know what, we need to step out. Kind of thing. There's no right answer, sorry. You know, it's just like there's no, like, magic bullet, like, yeah, you got it, right? So this is all just playing around with your thought process, playing around with different skills that you might be putting into practice. Okay. Ooh, yeah, if you keep your handouts and you keep this one slide, take it with you for the rest of your life. These are golden questions. I'm not sure how many times it would be helpful in this scenario, but I can't not put it into my materials. If you're in a tough situation, you're in a family conflict, it's been going on for weeks or hours or whatever it is, ask these 3 questions. Of course, and then you have to genuinely listen to the response, right? But that's the hard part. All right. Okay. Setting boundaries. This is kind of a no-brainer, and yet it's easier said than done. How many of us are really good at setting boundaries? Anyone? I saw one hand. You know, it's not something they teach in school. It probably should be. And it's really actually about the fundamentals of negotiation. If you want to put a fancy word on it, there's a lot of books around negotiation. Setting boundaries is a huge piece of just getting by in life. It's part of that 4th step of the roadmap. Golden rule, sort of modified golden rule, you know, treat others how you want to be treated. Well, this is treat others or set boundaries in a way that best reaches the other person. It's a little bit of a twist. Okay? So instead of treat other people how you would want to be treated, the modified golden rule is treat other people the way that they need to be treated. So that's just a tweak in the old kind of maxim there. So that's going to be a judgment call. That's going to be an intuitive thing in the moment. Make requests in concrete, specific, short-term ways. How much attention span do the people you work with have? Tiny. You don't want to speak in paragraphs. You don't want to ask them to make 3 or 4 requests all at once. Keep it simple, keep it concrete, keep it doable and measurable, and you're going to have better success. So if you're not good at making things really specific and concrete and short and brief, that's a muscle you're going to need to work on. And know your why. Keep coming back to that. Know your why. And if it is about, you know, the more people that are involved, kind of the more the weight is behind that why. An underlying value or need is a helpful way to get to know the why. Okay. All right, so we went through that pretty quickly, but we want to get to another tool here. It's called the BIF response again, 4th step. It's another tool for the 4th step of the roadmap. Based on the work of Bill Eddy, he's a licensed social worker and mediator. He mediates conflict cases between people who have severe mental health diagnoses such as borderline personality disorder, narcissism, all those fun things. Bless his heart. So he came up with a technique. If you come across this book, grab it. It's a short book. It's really accessible. Gives lots of great examples. So basically, this is how do you respond when communication is personal, or sounds personal. Anyway, you know it's never personal, but it sounds really personal. It's like your mama kind of thing, right? Emotionally intense, global. That means always, never, you all, you know, nobody, everybody, you know, those kinds of words. is shared with others. Oh, that's fun. Either the email is shared with everybody in the office, or it's in the middle of the shelter and someone's shouting at you. I was in a public meeting last night where someone said, that person hates blah, 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 in front of 200 people. Okay, all right, yeah. And it kind of triggers this desire to respond in kind. It's like, oh, okay, all right. That's how you want to be. I got some too, all right? You send me an email in all caps. I got all caps. And it inspires that negative gut feeling, that turn of the knife kind of, it's like, oh, very visceral. I mean, that may not happen to you, but for me, sometimes that's kind of like the first inclination of, oh, yeah. It may, their communication may have been fine. It might not have been all caps. It might have been friendly, but I know what's behind it, and they just undermined me. You know, it's like what happens on my end is when I might be triggered to use this particular tool, okay? So, BIF stands for brief, informative, friendly, and firm. Okay, so that's the acronym we're working with. We're going to describe each of the steps briefly, and then we'll go into a scenario where it might be helpful so you get to practice with it. Brief, what does that mean? 3 to 5 sentences? I don't know. In conversation, 3 to 5 sentences sounds like a lot, especially when, you know, we got short attention spans. So hold this with, you know, loosely, grain of salt. This is more for written communication. In verbal communication, brief means whatever brief means in that moment, okay? In the context that you're working with. So more than that invites engagement. If you start talking in paragraphs, they're going to do the same thing, and this is not what you want, right? And avoid taking anything personally. Easier said than done. And try not to. The informative piece, this is where we get the concrete specific, just the facts. But Sophie, you just talked about feelings and how important it is. Da, 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 da. When you need to respond to really like attacking kind of language, just the facts of the shelter developed a set of rules so that everyone, the most amount of people at the same time could have the best experience possible. These are the rules, and it's my job to enforce them. You have a choice if you can stay or you can go. What do you want to do? That's brief, and it's very specific. It's just the facts, okay? Focus on your accurate statements, not their inaccurate statements. You're a terrible shelter volunteer. This place is run by a bunch of, whatever. The accusations, you know, that's the kind of communication that I'm scaring the people who are new. I mean, it's just not necessarily what happens. But you know what I mean, when someone else is accusing you or whatever, saying this, that, and the other thing, just focus on your accurate statements, the things that you know about instead of what they're getting wrong. And avoid negative comments or personal remarks. Okay, friendly. Again, doesn't have to be sweet, all those things. Doesn't have to be overly friendly. Just open and neutral, kind of the way Paul was saying. All right, relaxed, non-antagonistic. So sometimes if I feel like I'm in a tense situation, again, maybe like you were saying, Paul, I'm just going to put my body in that relaxed posture. And I'm suddenly relaxed. It's just kind of this little magical thing that can happen. Acknowledge concerns as appropriate. I can see it might have been confusing coming in here because you're used to different rules at a different place. I would think that would be confusing too. So you can, you know, acknowledge concerns, you know, in the context, and include empathy and respect. So what we've already been talking about. So that's the friendly part, and here's the firm part. Again, we talked about those different muscles. Like I'm more like, I know how to be friendly. Not so great in the firm, right? So think about which one you need to work more with. The firm part, non-threatening. I mean, you're kind of in a position of power. You could actually evict them. So it's hard not to come across as non-threatening, but do your best. Be your restorative self, the we part of you. State the information, your position. Avoid, I hope you will agree, obviously. Sound confident. Again, if you sound confident, you can be more confident in yourself, even if you don't feel that way, right? You can just kind of help yourself get there. And respond to follow up with briefer versions of the same information. Some of this is a little bit more understandable in the written context. But if they, you know, someone's coming up to you again and checking in again about the policy of food and candy, it's like, You don't have to give them the whole spiel. Just repeat the same information, only shorter. So here's an example. And again, this is a written example, but it might give you a feel for what this looks like and why this can be a valuable tool. So this is kind of a nonprofit example a little bit. So Lenore and Susie are colleagues in a large human service organization. All week, Susie has been processing dozens of case files and had Lenore's request on her desk. Unaware of Lenore's deadline on Thursday morning, Susie received this email in her inbox. Yeah, all those fun things. So, okay, Susie, where are the Port Angeles files? You said you would get them to me by Monday, and now it's Thursday. Wednesday was the deadline. Now I'm not sure we're going to be able to process the request. You know, real people are depending on us, right? And this is not the first time. What do you want me to do here? I mean, they sound a little extreme. And though, in organizations that work with people in real need, have you ever seen this happen? Where people get pretty upset. It's kind of this thing where it's the mother bear comes out. And it could be someone who's controlling and tends to go off, you know, that might be personality too. And though, people's lives can be at stake. And so it can get serious enough that this kind of behavior can just kind of jump out in the most surprising ways. So you might be inspired to respond, oh, it's the first time you heard that she's having trouble with your follow-through. You might respond this way. How was I supposed to know your deadline? You don't have to be so rude. I'll have them when they're ready. The rest of us have jobs too. Okay? Probably not something you would do. But hey, that person's good at firm. They don't need to work that muscle. I'm actually kind of impressed by that, but I probably wouldn't go there. All right. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Lenore. I must have missed that email about the deadline. I'll have these to you as soon as possible. And again, I am so sorry. I can understand why this made things difficult for you. I'll make sure this doesn't happen again. What's wrong with that? Yeah. Yeah, you don't need to take responsibility for the whole world, and you're also kind of enabling this rather behavior. Okay, so a BIF response. Hello. Here we go. Brief, informative, friendly, informed. Lenore, thank you for checking with me and for letting me know of your concerns with my follow-through. Oh, the thank you. Get the friendly part there? I have been handling multiple urgent requests, and I'm happy to expedite yours. I can have the Port Angeles files ready for you by 1 p.m. this afternoon. That's specific. I'll have them to you as soon as possible? Nope, not going to work. Be really specific. Let me know if there's anything else you need from me. That's an open invitation to have a conversation with me about, apparently there's an issue with my follow-through. Okay, so that's brief, informative, friendly, informed. It's very professional. It's to the point. It's balancing the tension, right, between the friendly and the firm. And you're moving the conversation forward to problem solving right away. You're not getting mired in the, I don't have issues with follow-through. You know, you're not focusing on the inaccurate statements or whatever. You're focusing on what you know and what you can communicate. So, okay. Here's scenario number 2. I confess I didn't write this in the best way for a BIF. Normally I would probably want to put in some inflammatory language that you would be faced with. But here's the scenario. At the shelter one morning, as the guests are leaving, one asks you, you're a volunteer, for a ride to the ferry. Probably wouldn't happen here, it's just right over there. But, you know, some places. You want to respond in a way that won't escalate the situation. You also happen to have experienced this guest accusing volunteers of not caring when they don't get what they want. So you're anticipating maybe some of this language, blaming, you don't care, you think you care, you just want to make people think that you care and you really, you know, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so what's a BIF response to the guests that you might come up with? Keep it brief, informative, friendly and firm, and people who are new and don't know the rules, just make up some rules that you think the shelter might have or all that, and the why they would have those rules. Pro tip has to do with insurance, I think, right? Yeah. Liability, so that's huge. The shelter could get closed down. So that's a pretty big why. Maybe part of your BIF may not be, let's give you about 4 minutes for working on that.
Not anywhere.
offer them, offer them.
Well,
Oh, we have something to yes.
Just even asking them, where do you need to go, what time do you have to be there? Just that interaction of caring.
Anyone come up with anything? Yeah.
So I wrote, I would love to give you a ride, but due to your safety and my safety, we are not allowed to give guests rides, but I'd be happy to call G2G2, which is a service that will provide a ride for you to the fair.
I love that. So many things in that. You turned a no to a yes. We're going to have to say what we can't do, but we also offer what we can do. You gave the why, right, that they could relate to. And yeah, that's the solution. Yeah. Anybody else? And you kept it brief, informative, friendly, and firm.
And I'm guessing somebody's going to challenge the option to use the service.
Right, so there might be follow-up.
So we probably have to follow up.
Right, I know, it's so annoying. You have this perfect response, and then they come back with,
We came up with that
oh,
too, but yeah.
you guys, you have no idea. Well, you know how long it takes G2G2. It takes like 2 hours. I don't have that time. So then you have to,
It does take time, but if they really want that ride, you know, or we
Yeah.
can let them know, hey, 217 is going to be stopping out there in 40 minutes.
yeah. And what would be an empathy piece to all this? How would you do an empathy piece?
Just ask them where they're trying to go, or just try to understand a little bit better what are they trying to do.
Oh yeah, you could ask them questions. Yeah, what's going on? Or, I mean, if you can't really help, they may be like, well, why do you want to know? You know, I might be wanting to come out with, oh, I know, wouldn't it be nice if there were more buses and better transport? Oh, it's so frustrating. I mean, just be real. Our public transportation system is not okay. It does not work for people who have very little resources, you know, no cars and stuff like that. So, you know, you bring that out. Make somebody else the bad guy. That's always a really good tactic. I mean, seriously, use it when you can. All right, anybody else? Yeah, why not? Because they're not there.
Until they show up. Hey, we were
Well, the
here.
commission, yeah.
Who are we ultimately blaming? I missed that.
Oh, whoever's responsible for the fact that we don't have better public transportation. Yeah, it's really no in one individual, which makes it kind of safe. You know, we can all be mad at the big people or the government or something, right? Anybody else?
All my patients.
Okay. Very briefly, we're going to just go over one final tool. It may or may not be helpful. Some of these things may not really resonate, but if you're good with like, okay, I need to just step by step, a way to put this into a framework. I have something called ACTOR. Assessing the situation is really important. And over time, you're going to get better at sort of the judgment and trusting your own judgment. But the ability to walk in any situation and be wide open to like, what do I have here? Instead of assuming ahead of time the better off you're going to be. What do I have here? Assess myself. What's my state? Did I get enough sleep last night? Did I get enough food? Where am I coming from, number one? So I come into the shelter one night and I really haven't had enough food. I haven't had enough sleep. Okay, I'm going to need to really dial it down tonight and be really care and take care of myself, whatever I need to do. But also, what's the situation? Where am I at? Where's the door? How angry is this person? You know, those things. So you're going to want to assess things. Connect with the person. You know, this is you're bringing your empathy, the restorative part. Maybe the delight. Hey, I know I saw you last night. Welcome back. You know, just ways that you can connect that's genuine to you. Anything that you can pick up on, that you can talk about with them. All the things. It sounds patronizing. It's just being real. Because, I mean, you're not better, no one's better or worse than anyone, right? So connecting with people is huge, and that's kind of bringing all the pieces that we were talking about before together. Oh, so this is the test for compliance. If there's someone that you're like wondering how dangerous they're being, that's optional. And respond versus react, right? So responding is what we can do when we have the frontal lobe on board and we're not hyperventilating, okay? Reacting is probably not going to be great, so use all of your grounding skills, all your grounding tools, all the things that we may have talked about tonight or that you already have in your toolkit. to help you respond and be flexible and not reactive. And then, this is one of my favorite things, but think about it afterwards. How did that go? I mean, if it didn't go well, maybe you can brainstorm with, debrief with your fellow volunteers or whoever, like, how could that have gone better? What did I do? What did they do? What were some of the factors that were beyond my control that made it not go well, right? So debrief it in your head or with someone else, just so you can kind of build your muscles of how to be better prepared in all the situations. And don't forget, if it went well, what made it go well? Don't forget that part. So if you did a good job, sometimes it's hard to notice when you did a good job, but hopefully you pay attention to that too. All right, so just a little run through of tips. These are the do's and don'ts. Open body posture. Remove butt. Okay, I'd love to give you ride butt. Try to put and in there, right? Yeah. It's huge. It's so powerful. If you can remove the word but from your language and replace it with and, 98% of the time, the same meaning, if it sounds much better. Because but erases everything you just said before. And it doesn't sound genuine anymore. Whatever you said before doesn't sound genuine when you follow it with but. Okay? Try to avoid you. Replace it with we as much as possible. Given the scenario or the context. Keep conversations as private as possible. We touched on that one. So again, you want to remove them out if it's something that feels like if you're going to be setting a boundary with them, that's giving them that dignity of having that done and away from other people. So they have to save face or whatever that, just make that judgment in the moment. Avoid, this is the don'ts, right? Don't say calm down. And all variations. Any suggestions of superiority? Let's talk when you're calmer. Notice the you. How about let's talk when we're both feeling a little calmer, right? You can turn it into a we. Okay? Punishment. I'm not going to talk to you right now. Some of these may not apply here. It might be more like your teenager or your, okay, you don't have teenagers, but you might have at one point. Appeals to reasonableness, because guess what? Where they are in that chart, that yellow chart, where are they in that chart? They don't have reason. Right. That's the whole side effect of not having that part of your brain online. Okay. Avoiding arguing or pushing back. So there's an energetic aspect of this. This may seem like common sense, but if you held up your hand to the neighbor and said that the other person's hand was against yours and you pushed against it, what are they going to do? It's instinctual. You push against someone, they're going to push back, and that's improv theater, but it's also what happens verbally. You're gonna, someone's going to come up with you with something, and you argue back. Well, that's not true, or you shouldn't want that. You get the idea. It's only going to make them come up louder and stronger and bigger. Assuming, right? Remember that coming into a situation, not assuming, non-judgment. If two people are in conflict, avoid taking sides. That's a big one. Please don't take sides. Avoid using no, don't, won't, should, or stop. No and stop, yes, sometimes you're going to have to use no and stop. But if you can avoid it, you're going to want to use the alternatives as much as possible before you have to resort to those words. Okay? Don't, won't, should, shouldn't, yeah, not going to sound good. Avoid playing detective or litigating. Yeah, I'm not going to go into that right now, but that may make sense. Gold questions for ourselves. This is our own self-examination. What do I want? What am I doing? And how is what I'm doing getting me what I want? That's another version of the awareness wheel, just for your own self. Okay. So scenario time. I want to give a little time to go through. There's 3 scenarios at the end. Oh, okay. There's 3, 4, and 5. If anyone has trouble reading them, I can lend you my glasses. So let's have this side of the room start with 3. If you have time to go to 4, go to 4, and you can work in pairs. These are 3Ds. And this side of the room start with 5, and if you have time, go to 4, so that we can kind of see if we can cover all of them. And I'm going to give you I think 5 to 8 minutes. I'm just going to kind of gauge how far you are and how far you've gotten. So this is the number 3. This is about the room rumble. 4 is the guest grudge. And then 5, I'll swear if I want to. Okay. If anyone can't read the scenarios for the purpose of your work in groups, let me know.
It's wrapped up in a movie and that way that you're not in the
Well, then it becomes rather than third in there that you don't know. You don't know how that other one's. Like you're trying to figure out how I would. I like what you say, but what you can do when you're going to have none, you would have a choice of. Because that's how I watch the movie. And now I'm trying to figure out if I actually can look here. Well, anxious. Giving me instructions.
Gonna give a few minutes to each scenario. So let's start over here with scenario 5. Let me put the right one on the screen here. Oh, I'll swear if I want to. Okay, so what does that look like? Did you all come up with some ideas? Okay.
If the swearing is directed at us personally, and it feels really personal,
Yeah.
then, I mean, that's a kind of a different spin on it, I know, but other than just, general profanity, which...
Yeah, I think it's kind of directed at whoever's delivering the rules, probably, would be my guess. I mean, if you can approach it either way, so, but yeah. If that were the case, were you able to come up with anything, or was that still a question when you started?
That's a hard one. I mean, just because do I not have the right feelings? Or taking it, it'd be hard not to take it personally, I guess.
Yeah.
And so how do I acknowledge that's really offensive to me? And there is this rule against profanity, and we need to follow the rules.
When you said that, it sounded very genuine, very real, and pretty firm. So, I mean, I don't see much wrong with that. And now I'm hearing, you're kind of wondering, if I'm so anxious, am I really going to be able to deliver this in a convincing way or an appropriate way? So, yeah, we can talk about that. Yeah, you had your...
Well, we talked about, because if the person is swearing, we're going to assume that they're angry. And so trying to make them listen to the rules at that point in time would not be a good idea if we didn't think. And to maybe get them opt to have like something to eat, a glass of water, and when they are in a calm, situation, hopefully then come back and say, I just want to explain, why we have the rules. Did I capture that?
Okay, so give them a break, to de-escalate themselves, calm down.
We would not tell them to calm down.
Right, because we know that. Yeah, it could be a relationship building time, like change the subject. God, where'd you come from today? And nice coat, or I don't know what, that's genuine. I gather this isn't a great time to hear the rules. It's our policy, so we'll have to give them to you sometime, but doesn't have to be right now? I don't know. Other ideas? Yeah.
Yeah, but does it have to?
Oh, wait, I'm going to go here first and then, yeah. Sorry, it's okay.
I just said that I've had this experience before.
Okay.
Most of us probably have. And I just said, I'm not here every single time when the shelter's open. So this is a refresher for me. So can you just bear with me while I go through the rules to remind myself of what all of them are?
For the win. Yeah, make it about you too. Okay?
And they were okay with it. They were bored, but they were okay.
Yeah. They're like, oh, you poor thing. Have to be reminded of these rules. Okay. Yeah, someone else.
In terms of, this is not, you might not be able to answer this, but in terms of what she said, are we allowed to wait until someone de-escalates a little bit?
Okay, that's a no. That's a no. Okay.
No.
It's the first thing that we do.
Yeah.
That's
what I was wondering.
Okay. So you could cancel that other piece there. Sorry.
You guys just got fired from your
Sometimes there's a lot of pressure if there's more than 2 or 3 people at once coming in and one's not going through. So I'm kind of wondering about that, because it's like we have 2 people behind you too, so if he's being belligerent, you could probably maybe say, well, why don't, we'll check him in first or something. I don't know, because
I think giving ground may not be the best approach. Like, just stand your ground, be firm, and say this is our, the way she said it.
or you could say, hey, we could read all the rules together.
Can you do that?
Yes.
Yeah, so you can read it to all these people. So, hey, we got a crowd here. So it's not just about you. It'd be great if you could stay. Kind of, yeah.
So I interpreted her selection of defer, like delaying it, as in go off to the side, like we have our desk, our entry desk, off to the side near the Boys and Girls Club, and take a chill, have a bottle of water, and then before we check you in, and in some way, like Steve, Steve is the one that comes to mind. I will name names. We're gonna I have to read the rules, and I read them backwards to them, like, start at the bottom, and, just
mix it up.
So there's an assumption, so the defer wasn't like you're going to go unpack,
Later, yeah.
get your cot ready, just a momentary breather, especially if someone's having stress.
Yeah, I like that. And I like the humanity of just like, you're going to mix it up because how boring is it to hear these things every time, All right. It's in the back.
We do have the benefit of working with a partner. We always have 2 people on a shift. So if there's ever a kind of a gritty feeling between one volunteer and the guest, switch them out.
Hand off. Okay, excellent.
That can really help.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Did you have something else? No. Okay. Let's go to 3. Room rumble. They wanted to move their bed down the hall. All the volunteer last night. Let me do that. All right. What approach might you take? Anybody come up with something? I know you did.
Yeah, I'm sorry that the person let you do that last night, but we need to keep this room open for, in case the police come to bring somebody.
The police? I'm acting now. What? They're going to come and arrest me?
The police like bring a family or a woman in, and we need to keep a room for one of them.
Okay. Does that work for you guys? Okay. Yeah, sounds good to
We
me.
added one thing, we said, where in this room would be a better placement for you?
A nice open-ended question.
So
Like it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
what is going on before they start by finding out why. Like, they could not be feeling well, they could, there could be many reasons, different reasons. So I would just start by finding out why they would like to move.
When the answer is still going to be no, it might be that you want to lead with the no. And also, I'm curious, is there something going on that I should know about that would make you want to go out in the hall because we want to be able to help? Yeah.
I'd be careful about throwing another volunteer under the bus. You don't even know for sure that happened. So I wouldn't necessarily say, oh, that volunteer was wrong. They should never have done that.
Okay,
but
great.
yeah, just
Great.
stick with the here and now.
Yeah. So you can go with their experience, right? I'm sorry that's what you heard. It's kind of leaving it open. I'm sorry that's what you heard or that you understood or that you may have experienced not going to happen tonight. Right. For all the reasons, and you're going to say it better than I just did. Yeah. Okay. Number 4, did anyone get a chance to do that one? Oh yeah. Another volunteer is harassing me. They have demons in their soul and they stole my wallet. That's a fun one.
This is where we get to deflect and say, well, we'll take it up with the shelter parents.
Yeah, there we go.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I know.
We sort of did have this happen to me about talking about demons and stuff, but not about stealing the wallet. But they weren't violent or anything, so you just kind of listened but not really fed the conversation. And then the part about the wallet, my feeling is, when you don't know if they had a wallet when they came in. You don't know. You could offer to have them go with you and check, because they check in their gear, their extra stuff. And you could have them go with you and let them go through their stuff. Maybe it was in there and they forgot it was in there. It's a possibility.
Okay.
The worst case scenario is there's usually a complaint form. They could fill that out. If they don't fill it out, maybe they weren't that serious, I don't know. But again, as volunteers, we've got a logbook we write in. Documentation's there too.
Okay. Great. Did everyone hear most of it? No, not so much.
Organizers, since we're new, as far as this situation, are volunteers allowed to go alone with the clients into a separate room? Because all the child protection and vulnerable adult protection classes I've had, there's no one-on-one, and this seems to be strictly against that.
And they wouldn't, because their belongings would be in that closet on the left, and the guests are not allowed in that closet. So if somebody was worried that their wallet wasn't no longer in their bag, I would instruct the volunteer to bring the bag back out so that you had witnesses that, no, it is there or it is not there. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, you would not go into the closet with the guest to go through their belongings. I would get it, bring it back out so that both volunteers could witness looking through the bag to be sure that was there. That's a good question.
But you very often are alone. Like in this room, when you're setting up the cots, someone has to be at the table out in the hallway to make sure that you're, we've got Narcan, we've got all kinds of stuff in the sign-up table. I'm not using the right word.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to show them where's the food, this is where your cot is, but that second person is always within earshot.
So within earshot. Okay, great. Any other ideas for number 4? Yeah.
I'm sort of experiencing this. Can you believe the weather lately? You like the Seahawks. You like reading a book, and then a lot of times it goes away because it's probably a falsehood anyhow. And then if it doesn't, then you can bring it back around. Oh, well, let's take a look. Let's look together.
Yeah, you can have different approaches. Not one could be a really nice one to roll out first off, and you'll find out if it doesn't work. And then you, like you say, you can go to the problem solving. Again, there's no right answers. It's just let's all play in the sandbox and figure out what works and what doesn't work. Again, if what you're doing is working, keep doing it. And yes.
I didn't hear everything you said, but I got the impression that you used humor.
Distraction. Yeah, I'm so sorry you heard that. And what about this weather? Or great coat, or deflection. It's actually kind of a bystander tool as well when you're talking about interfering in bystander situations in the public or in the workplace. Deflect is a tool. So that might be something that's useful. Use your intuition, judgment. So for the person who came in wanting a little more confidence, how are we doing? You feel great, right? I don't know if they're still here. So how to handle someone who seems to be anxious. Whoever brought that up in the beginning, how are we doing in that realm? Any improvement? Yeah? Skills that seem to work, it's hard to tell because you haven't tried them out yet. Did you get any new skills tonight, maybe? A couple of new ones for your tool bag. Better listening skills. We talked about what's underneath the water for the iceberg, the facts, feelings, and underlying needs. So, and how to keep yourself from escalating. We did the awareness wheel and also all the grounding tools that are out there. Feel free to. Oh, and Danielle, can you get the yellow folder? I do have evals, if you could take a couple minutes just to fill out the evals for the organizers and let us know how this workshop was for you. And we'll just try to get this done quickly so you're out of here not too late. Appreciate your patience, and thank you.
Thank you.